Creativity is expressing or capturing your unique, idiosyncratic vision of something that can possibly alter someone else's perception of themselves or the world around them through viewing it.
I'm Louis Maroney, and this is Constraints, the podcast from Hi-Fi Handiwork, a 20-episode series. Each episode is a chat with a guest from a creative industry about a project obstacle they've experienced, viewed through the lens of project management's three constraints of scope, time, and budget. Further insights and commentary can be found in the show notes. We hope you enjoy the program. We can all agree that filmmaking is a creative industry. Whether short or feature length, linear or nonlinear, realistic or fantastical, a film aims to express an idea enveloped in a script with dialogue created by the mind of a writer, portrayed in moving images, and supported by a small army of micro-project managers responsible for other creative inputs such as sets, costumes, music, graphics, and props. Each film is unique and untested until put out into the world, and as such, has what Richard E. Caves terms the nobody knows property. For these reasons and more, filmmaking can probably be considered a quintessential creative industry. But what about if the dialogue doesn't come from a script, and you're just hearing whatever comes to the mind of the person on the screen? No army of micro-project managers providing the clothes, sets, or music. What if the poster that you see in the frame is for an actual intergenerational showcase of sonic poets at the Transact Club? I think you can guess that I'm describing documentary filmmaking, which is also 100% a creative industry. But when you strip away all of the creative inputs that contribute to the production of a dramatic film, it does get you wondering why we know documentary filmmaking is a creative industry. It's not because of the technical media of video and audio production, or the vehicles and drivers needed to cart the equipment around. Still necessary components, but ones that Caves would categorize as humdrum inputs. No. Just like dramatic filmmaking, documentary filmmaking tells a story. And though the lines are not scripted and the people speaking aren't actors, the person directing the location of the camera and deciding when it's turned on and who or what it's pointing at has a story to tell as much as any scriptwriter. And after all the footage has been chosen and edited and sequenced, the final product has as much as a nobody knows property as any dramatic film. Well, today's guest is a documentary filmmaker with a filmography that spans decades. She explores intriguing and challenging relationships like between African domestic workers and the white children that they care for, or between the film viewer and the life of a cow destined for the abattoir, or, most recently, between a traditional Zimbabwean musical instrument and the colonial history that tried to erase it. I am very excited to speak with Adrienne Amato today. Adrienne, welcome to Constraints.
Thanks, Louis. Interesting, the whole thing about documentary and how it's made, because I think in making film you're always trying to catch this little magic or get these golden moments, and they're even more surprising in documentary. You
I imagine that's very exciting.
You prepare and you prepare. That's how I work, and then once you're there, your job is just to be in the present and try and capture what's actually happening, which is not as easy as you think.
I have no experience, nor do I imagine that it would be. So let's jump right in. You're here to talk about a project obstacle, and you can set that up in whichever way you want.
Yeah, I wanted to start just by saying, because my journey in doing film is different than most people, because I kind of have my foot in two different worlds. I was working in mental health for many, many years as an occupational therapist and then a psychotherapist. And then I got interested in film because it kind of brought together all these things I love, like sound, music, images, and interest in people and how they, what makes us tick. And so I got into it through editing. I didn't do any formal school. So I was an assistant editor and I was watching and I got super excited. And then I just started making films. So I learned through making it.
And when you were doing the editing, you were doing editing for documentaries?
Yeah, for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And actually started like editing a little drama, like just being an assistant and just learning through filmmaking through doing that. And then I had the idea to go to Zimbabwe to make my first documentary. And I went with my partner at the time. He was a filmmaker and a cinematographer. So we went together and just dove in and did it that way.
Wow, that's amazing. So
Yeah.
you're just like, I'm going to make a documentary now, and you go back to Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm giving a little bit of history because not that things were easy to do these other things, but they were more manageable. And I had the idea. We went. Of course, it's difficult to do, but we borrowed a camera from the NFB actually, and just dove in and learned.
How did you borrow from the NFB? And we're sorry, what year are we talking about here?
We're talking about 1989.
1989. Amazing.
So it's way back. The NFB lent us a 60 millimeter old camera, like a Niagara, I think it's called. And it was like it was incredible, just going and learning and doing and just diving in. And then I came back and I took a little bit of time off of doing King as a therapist. And I just concentrated on editing the film. And then, just always going back and forth between those two worlds.
And which film was that?
That was Forgotten Mother. Yeah,
and that was about the
domestic workers taking care of white kids. Yeah. And it was a really personal film. So the first thing I did was extremely personal, which was, it was hard to do. It was difficult, but it did really well. It showed on CBC. Like things kind of, I'm not, in hindsight, I'm making out like it all was effortless, but it wasn't. But things went pretty smoothly.
Yeah, and nothing. I mean, let's just say, especially in the creative industries, nothing successful is ever easy.
No. Yeah, for sure. And I think then, I was wanting to make film and I always felt comfortable kind of having, like kind of one foot in the real world, I'm saying, and one in the creative world. Like, so I think they informed each other. So my work with people kind of informed my ideas and what I want to show and make films about. And
so do you feel, I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you feel like the experience speaking with people made your subject matters more meaningful than they would have been, or it was just anything would have been meaningful, but you just were able to collect different perspectives or
I think
topics?
so. I think being a therapist, like, it affects the way I perceive, like the way I ask questions, the way I listen, the way I formulate what's going on. I think it definitely informs it. And then also there's that creative side of me who always has had this visual side and was learning about that and learning how I want to pace things and how, like, that whole inner visual world that I had. So it's like combining the two,
right?
And also like approaching documentary. That was a difficult thing too, though, like trying to not be the therapist during the documentary and just letting things just happen without intervening.
Okay. When you're in therapy with someone, like I imagine, and I know this is different, but, lying on the couch and just spewing whatever comes from your head, and really the therapist in that case is just letting you speak without really telling you what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think like not intervening, like it was difficult. I'm jumping around, sorry, but
I'm jumping around.
Yeah, I made another film called First Break that was an NFB co-production. So that was a lot easier because I had a whole team of people helping. It was like a co-pro with the NFB, and it was about kids going through a first episode of mental illness. So, and we followed people for a year, and that was, having to like just follow people and see what's going and not affect what was happening with them. Like the therapist in me had to stand back and not like help or give resources or suggest things.
You would be like, hey, maybe you should try this.
Yeah, or so I had to, just step back. In that way, it's interesting. It's interesting. But that film, I mean, it ties into what we're talking about with constraints because there were getting that funding was amazing and getting that co-production, but it's the only film I've made where I had a whole team of people helping.
Right.
And, it made a whole bunch of things easier. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so now
So yeah, let's
move into your topic here.
Yeah.
Your problem. And now I feel like the therapist.
No, you're avoiding talking about
yes.
what we're here to talk about.
Let's talk about what we're really here to talk about.
Okay, so the current project that I'm actually finally about to finish is Mbira Talks, and it's a feature-length documentary. And I started working on this in 2011.
Wow,
So
amazing.
that,
So essentially what we're saying here is time was not a constraint.
Well, yeah, time has been really difficult because of all the things that were out of my control. Like I would have liked to have done it fast, but
when you started, did you have a goal of when you wanted to be done by? When you started in 2011?
I never thought it would take this long.
How long did you think it would take? Did you think it would take 2
like
years?
Maybe 5 maximum.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the original idea, this amazing Mbira player, Stella Chiweshi, approached me to make a film that was called Stone Speak. And it was like a very spiritual film, very esoteric. Right from the get-go, there were just so many constraints and obstacles. We couldn't get funding, couldn't get visas for her to come to Canada, couldn't get support from Zimbabwe. Things were just not happening. So after a while, she kind of, this is the short story, she said, okay, you can take this project and move it into something else. So then it morphed into doing a film about a friend of mine, Moyo Mutamba. So it was about Mbira music. Sorry, I'm being so vague.
No, that's fine. Was the original idea about Mbira?
It was about Mbira, but from a very different take. It was like we were going to try film ceremony. It was talking about seeing the world in a different way, like connecting to nature in a different way. It just was really hard working with Mbira Chiweshi because she was on a different plane. She was very shamanic.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard to get support for it and articulate what we were doing and hard to just get it going.
Because when you are trying to sell a documentary idea, when you're trying to get funded, obviously you need to explain what it is.
Yeah.
But you can't explain what it
was hard to articulate what it was. So someone would have had to take a major leap of faith, which I wish they would have done because I think it would have been incredible. It would have been a different film. But it was hard to, it's hard enough making a film. And it's even harder when they're having to support something that loose. And
okay, so we're going to get back to but I am going to digress just out of curiosity. You've done Mbira Talks now. If someone came to you and said, I'm ready to fund that original idea, is there room for that still? Or
I would love to. Sadly, the main woman who came to me with the idea, wanted me to make it, is not alive anymore.
Oh my goodness.
But
wow.
And
but otherwise.
Otherwise, yes.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about Mbira Talks then.
Okay. So I met the main person on a street. He was busking, playing Mbira, which is like this, it's like a kalimba, sacred Zimbabwean musical instrument. And we exchanged phone numbers and I invited him over to my garden. And this doesn't usually happen, but he came and we started becoming friends. And he knew I was trying to do this other project. And then it morphed into, from getting to know him, wanting to do something that looked at his journey of connecting with his indigeneity through playing Mbira while he had immigrated to Canada, and then taking it back to Zimbabwe to try and, get Zimbabweans to reconnect with like their pre-colonial knowledge. That's basically that sums it up. But the process was so hard. A lot because there were things that were really out of my control. Getting funding for it, even though he's Canadian, it took so long to get a grant, like just to start off.
From the Canadian government?
Yeah. I got like a Toronto Arts Council grant in 2012, and that was like, woo, I'm going to do this. This is where I was like, it's going to be done in a couple,
Right, yeah.
And like, on the road doing it. But of course, it was not enough money to barely do anything.
Right. Even going, woo, with your hands up, it feels like you're on a roller coaster. So
yeah.
It's like, it must be so emotionally draining. I mean, especially like, how do you self-care? I mean, you're, especially as a therapist, do you feel like the stress of that experience, because I'm sure you're going to explain more of them. But through this journey, how do you make sure that you're okay?
It took a really long time to make sense of how I moved through the process. I'm trying to be linear, but I'm not linear. So we might go all over the place. But I only had massive realizations. I was incredibly depressed. That was the first, I got the grant. It was like, yeah, you're right. The roller coaster, amazing. Book time to go to Zimbabwe, worked a lot in trying to get the Ministry of Information there to agree that we can go, because they're very suspicious politically about what people are coming in. It was the Mugabe time, so people are obviously suspicious that we're coming to make something that's anti-Mugabe, and like some kind of political thing, which we weren't doing. But so it was a ton of work to get permission to go. Had booked the tickets. We were going to do the shoot. I will say I had like amazing support from two friends, like Tess Gerard, who is the director of photography, and Ryan, who is my editor, Ryan North, and they both gave so much support in terms of doing things cheaply, because it's a big thing to go to Zimbabwe and film. Providing services,
And no chance of any funding from Zimbabwe.
I tried, but couldn't get any.
Right.
Yeah, I tried all different.
I mean, really, you had the idea, and you had a notion of when you'd like to complete the film, but really it's all about the money here.
Yeah, it's about the money and also getting permission. We'd gotten finally, I'm really summarizing tons of work, and tons of ups and downs, but finally got permission from the Ministry of Information, bought the tickets for all of us to go. And then I can't remember, it must have been 2 or 3 days before they sent a letter saying, we've decided you can't come.
Wow.
No explanation given. Frantic
Would
calls.
this have been the first time you went to Zimbabwe?
No, I made Forgotten Mother there, but that was a different political time.
Yeah, no, I mean for this film.
Oh, yeah, for this film. So this was the first
plan
time
you were going to go there and you're going to do all
the whole shoot.
All the footage.
Yeah, with the funding we had, get all the footage.
How long were you going to be there for?
For 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah, so we were told no, and I was totally devastated. And, frantically calling, trying to get hold of people really high up to get a reason, never given a reason. So felt, really, really disheartened.
Sure.
And when you say, how did I cope? I mean, I got really depressed about it. I felt really disheartened. Like there was a series of things that were just, going wrong with it. And stuff had gone really wrong with the original project that I had tried to get, like not getting visas for Stella to come here. So this is where I spiraled into thinking this is not supposed to happen. Yeah. So I got into all that kind of, this is not meant to be. Maybe I should just give up, getting really despondent about it. And I think that's where, and I started trying to apply for more funding as well, which I think I applied to Canada Council 3 times. On the 3rd time I got money, but that was in 2019. So big gap. So there's this huge gap between 2012 and 2019.
The trip to Zimbabwe, did you lose the money for the tickets?
I remember what happened to this.
What year was that? Sorry.
So that was like 2012.
2012.
So then we did finally get permission. And people were saying, just go kamikaze and go and film.
Right,
and you don't have to get permission. Just go and do it. But that's not my nature. So I'm not someone I wanted to have permission. I didn't want to run into problems when I got there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I could have done that. I think someone else might have done that, just gone. Because when I found out I didn't have permission, a lot of people were saying to me, just go. You've got the gear. You've got it all worked out. Just go. I had these awful visions of being stopped at the airport or getting people into trouble.
You're on file. And then, when you do get permission, then if there is trouble, you have someone to contact. You have some support in theory.
In theory. So, it was very disheartening. And then I kept trying to apply and then finally got permission again in 2014. And that's where we went and did the shoot in 2014.
So you got all of the footage in 2014.
Yeah, 2014. Came back, was an amazing shoot, got incredible stuff. But then I had no money to do the finishing. So not very good planning. So started applying to Canada Council to get finishing.
Right. I mean, money. I don't know if it's not very good planning. You were determined to do this project. And you did what you could as you got the money. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. And I think, oh my gosh, I should have thought about this more. There were so many things that got in the way. I think I did also go and film in Vancouver because part of the footage which is not going to end up being in the final film. But in 2016, I filmed in Vancouver because there's an Mbira community there.
Mm-hmm.
And the main subject of the film, Moyo, goes and teaches Mbira on Vancouver Island. So we went and filmed that. And then finally, 2019, after 3 attempts at getting funding from Canada Council, I ended up getting the grant. And again, it was like, woo!
Right.
Now I can finish this. I think the difficulty, I'm just going to dive into it.
Yeah.
I think the difficulty is because, this is what I struggled with, because I've got 2 different, I've got this job of being a therapist and that's how I survive and that's how I make money. It's always also takes double as long because I'm trying to balance those 2 things of getting some dedicated time to do the film. So I would struggle between if I just was like a filmmaker and I was just doing that, it would be a lot faster.
How did your constraints in time, given that you had to work, affect the people you were working with? Like your main character. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm terrible with names.
Moyo
right,
Mutamba.
who I've met. I mean,
yes.
I'm sorry, Moyo.
He's been amazing.
Ready, he was ready and willing at a drop of a hat, or
yeah, we had to work around different schedules.
Sure.
Yeah, that's really difficult. And with the DOP and with the editor, I had to work with people who are willing to be incredibly flexible and do the work when it can be done, rather than, even in this edit, not having like a 16-week edit and it's solid, like working on days when we're both available.
Right. You mean the editor, when the editor was available?
Yeah.
Because your time is... It's not like you could book studio time for a week and say that's it. You just hey, can you? Did that affect who you could hire as an editor?
Absolutely, 100%. But I'm really glad I worked with Ryan because we have a really amazing working relationship, and he was super flexible. And I was lucky I got him at a time where he could be flexible. But it's it goes between that whole thing of, I'm going back in time now. When my daughter was born, like way back, I had this decision whether I was because I'd made like another film, like I'd made the NFB film, and I was, trying to decide I'm going to go into film full time.
Right.
Should I do this and not work in mental health? And I got a job with an offer for a job at a documentary production company. And I said, well, what are the hours going to be? And they said, whenever we need you, basically. Right. It was like a 70-hour work week or something. And at that point, I was like, can I really do this? Do I want to be a mom? Is that my priority? And have a job where, I have some control over the time? Or do I go into this full time? So it's that whole thing of as an artist, being a part-time artist, it's like, you feel delegitimized in some way because you're not really the thing. You're doing these different things. But I decided, no, that's what I really do want to be there. I want to be a mom. I actually do, at my own personality, I don't know if I'm great with freelance. I think I need that security and that safety of having something solid.
And like you said earlier, you've benefited from your experience as a therapist. It's informed your art as a documentary maker.
Yeah.
Is there a certain feeling that you have? Because at some point you felt, oh my God, this is never going to happen, or it's not meant to happen. Is there a sense that you have that it's close to being released now, that it's actually coming out at the right time?
Yeah. It's like hindsight, it's actually, this is a perfect time for it. I think people are really open to look at post-colonial trauma, connecting with indigeneity, a relationship to the earth. So I think it is actually a perfect time for it, but it certainly didn't feel like that with all those obstacles along the way.
Were there ever times during the process where you felt like, well, maybe it's not the right time now and this is why these things are happening, or everything just felt like a start-stop frustration?
It just felt like, it was really depressing. I felt like, is this ever going to be done? Should I be doing this? There's always a tiny part of me that perseveres, but it was it didn't feel like things were lining up. And it's like, is this going to happen?
Right.
Like, is this actually going to be able to happen? I think that's where I wanted to talk about, like, obviously from a therapist's point of view, the psychology of like dealing with constraints or like obstacles, because I think just recently, about a year ago, I realized how important it is, like how you, like just the different ways people deal with it. Because I think all those obstacles, some people would have been, okay, here's this obstacle. Damn it, I'm going to climb this wall. Like it's that thing of like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to overcome it. I'll show you,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that personality is people who are driven by that. Like whether it's an insecurity of I'm going to show you, I can do this with, I think that really helps people achieve. I do not have that gene. I realized like my thing more was like when things went wrong, I would like my core belief is more around responsibility. Like I'm doing something wrong or I'm to blame for it, or this is some, you do meaning making when you have these obstacles. You try and figure out what's the meaning of this. And I think the different ways that you interpret it really affect success. So someone who's like just externalizes, this is shit, I'm going to overcome it, that's very different. Or people who have like a really strong sense of self-worth where it's like they get other people to join their cause, or like to believe in them and support them. I think those are the things that help to succeed in things.
Sure, but you, despite saying that you're not those things, you persevered.
True.
So I have a couple questions here. My first question is, so you persevered.
Yeah.
So what is it that kept that drive, even though you didn't treat those obstacles in that rah way?
I think that desire to communicate, like the actual project, like the belief in what I was trying to express, and that being bigger than me.
Right.
And feeling like that's worthy and honoring that, and actually also majorly honoring the people in the film and honoring telling their story and giving voice to that. I think that really is what kept me going through it. And every time I'd speak to Moyo, I'd get re-inspired and think, yeah, I got to do this. It's more the idea. I think like, I don't know, I've just realized, all this projects.
Wait, you just realized right now?
No.
Oh, okay.
I wish. Okay. But, I realized like as I've gotten older, like all those things that I used to perceive as, it's that thing of like, you can have talented people, they may not succeed because either you don't know how to work the system or you're doing it all your own. I mean, I'm making this feature film. I did it totally on my own. Obviously it would have been, and I had the help of, Ryan and Tess, but like not like the kind of supports that people have, or the supports I had when I was doing the NFB film. So it's like, now I realize it's not you. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just that it's a really huge undertaking.
It is. So this is my follow-up question. Get ready for it. So if you had been that kind of rah, every obstacle is a challenge and you're ready to take it on and you pull people in, do you think the movie or film, the documentary, would be different? And would it have been, I mean, this might be an unanswerable question, but do you think it would have been different? Do you think it would have been better? Do you think it would, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard one because, it would have been easier on me emotionally, but I think.
Don't your emotions feed the project to a certain degree or
not?
Yeah,
maybe. I mean, I think that it's given it a huge amount of time to grow organically. My relationship with Moyo has evolved. So, and the actual film, it's really interesting because all my original, like the main ideas are in it, which is great, but the actual form of it is very different than it would have been, I think, if it had been done fast. Yeah, it's more focused on his story and the journey,
So I guess imagining what it would have been if it was faster, it sounds like the time that it took actually gave it a bit more time to
breathe and grow. And obviously, because of my circumstance of working, like I wouldn't be able to have that if I was doing film 100%. Like it would be much more, I would be like, Yeah, it would be like the edit would be like a 16-week edit or whatever, solid, and I'm sure it would be a great thing. I'm not saying
Sure.
it's better or worse.
But also, I guess if you, how am I saying this? You're a different person tomorrow than you are today.
Yeah.
So it was a different person at the end of this journey
Yeah.
than it would have been if you had been able to finish it faster.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it gave us, time to film Moyo over many, many years. And he's shifted too. And consolidate and kind of, the main points were things that he kept coming back to. Yeah. I mean, you could keep going forever. There's a point where you have to stop. But I think it is interesting that, I think that this is a better time for the film to come out.
Right.
Which is great. That's kind of the silver lining. But again, we do this meaning making. Of course, it would have been easier if I just got funding and didn't have all this.
Right. Well, you know what? I think silver lining is a great way we'll take that silver lining and we'll make it into a thread and we'll tie up this conversation. Like, thank you so much. This was a really nice conversation.
Aww.
Do you want to tell people where to find you or what to look out for?
So the film is in the process of I'm doing the sound edit now and just finishing things. So it should be done in October. And if you want to follow
October 2024.
Yes. And if you want to follow the progress of it, you can follow it on Instagram. It's Mbira Talks, Mbira Talks. And I think it's going to be beautiful. I can't wait to show it. I can't wait to go back to Zimbabwe, to all the villages where I filmed. Going to get a generator, get a sheet up, show it, and have dialogue about the film. I'm going to go with Moyo. And I can't wait for people to see it here and just keep the dialogue going around the film. This is a whole nother phase. It's going to be really exciting.
Well, congratulations making it to this phase. And
unbelievable.
I wish you, I think I wish you an easier journey on the next phase. I think you deserve it.
Thanks, Louis. Thanks.
And so thank you very much.
Oh, thanks.
Constraints the Podcast receives resource support from the Alan Slate Radio Institute at Toronto Metropolitan University and is co-produced by Louis Moroney and Mihir Kore. Please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts to automatically be notified when a new episode is posted. Also, follow us on Instagram at constraints_podcast. Constraints the Podcast is brought to you by Hi-Fi Handiwork. Sound advice.